Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Human Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The front door bangs hard enough to rattle the picture of Robert and me on the pier. Wind chimes tangle and clack in the salty draft from the river. I'm setting a basket of folded towels on the hall bench when Ethan barrels across the old pine floorboards, his shoulders squared like he's bracing for impact. "Mom, what did you do?" His voice fills the house louder than the gulls outside. Brianna just got declined at Harbor Market. Full cart. People staring. I take a breath and hold his eyes. I canceled the virtual card I set up on my banking app. It was temporary. It was mine. "So you wanted to humiliate her?" He throws a hand toward the window as if the river can witness for him. "We're family. You don't do that to family." "I don't do that to anyone," I say, steady as I can, but my retirement isn't a public utility. Ethan steps closer, cologne and heat washing ahead of him. He's 35 and still has the same green-flecked eyes that used to plead for one more minute at the playground. Brianna was buying groceries, cleaning supplies, not champagne. That isn't the point. I lift the basket enough to set it aside, a small act to keep my hands from trembling. The card is attached to my savings. I set it up because you said you'd run errands when I had my follow-up appointment. That was weeks ago. He laughs short and mean, "So this is payback." "No," I say, "this is a boundary." The word hovers in the foyer like a foreign language. Ethan's jaw ticks. "You're choosing money over your own family. I'm choosing stewardship over waste." He looks past me over my shoulder to the framed nursing pin on the wall, New Hanover Regional Night Shift. "You worked nights for years after Dad died. You sacrificed. That's what parents do." He's trying to stack my past against me, as if love is a ledger and he's got the receipts. I think of the bleached lights in that hospital of coffee gone cold, in paper cups of slipping inside at dawn, so I wouldn't wake him before school. I think of the tuition payments I made when scholarships fell short, how we stretched casseroles for 2 nights by adding rice. I think of the check I wrote to ease his first month's rent when he swore commissions would pick up any day. Those were choices I made freely, I say. They were not blank checks for the rest of my life. His mouth curls. "So now you're done being a mother." I feel the old house take a breath around us, the tick of the kitchen clock, the moan of a plank under a shift of weight. "I'm still your mother," I say, "which is why I'm asking you to lower your voice." He doesn't. The distance between us isn't measured in steps. It's measured in what each of us thinks the other owes. The first time he brought Brianna over, she stood on my porch with a bouquet of sunflowers and a smile that could have sold the Atlantic Ocean. I made shrimp and grits, and we ate on the back steps, passing a mason jar of sweet tea. She told me I had coastal grandmother aesthetic, and we laughed. She offered to help me set up automatic bill pay on my phone because no one should be driving checks around town anymore. When she said it, it felt like kindness. The asks were small at first. $40 for an inhaler, then a screenshot of a pharmacy receipt. Later that night, I saw Princess Street Salon charge in the bank feed and told myself it must be a tip for the pharmacist. A week after that emergency vet bill for a dog I barely saw, followed by dinner at Dockside with a photo of oysters and sparkling water. Hairline cracks. Dottie next door calls them so fine you only notice the shift when something heavy finally falls. When Ethan suggested a virtual card for grocery runs just for a day, "Mom, you can set a limit." I nodded. I wanted to believe I was helping and not enabling. I set a budget, turned on alerts. The alerts came anyway. Boutique delivery apps, a chair massage, tucked between 2 charges for produce. I had the conversation with myself I've been having since he turned 16. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe she misclicked. Maybe I'm being old-fashioned and suspicious. Silence is a grease that makes the wrong wheels spin easier. Now he stands with that old teenage storm in his eyes. "You don't get to move the goalposts," he says. "We need certainty. We can't build a life around your mood." My mood, I repeat, and something hard in me clarifies. My money, my name, my responsibility. Then say you don't want to help and stop pretending. I'm saying I answer that if you need help, you ask, and I reserve the right to say no. He shakes his head like I've failed a test that he believed I'd pass. Brianna called me crying mom. Imagine standing there while a cashier reads your name and declines the card. How would you feel? I would feel mortified, I answer, because that's true. And then I would pay with my own. He flinches, and for a second, I see the boy who wanted a pirate cake with blue icing and cried when the candles guttered in the wind. Then it's gone. He glances at the doorway to the living room at the photos arranged in a grid. First day of kindergarten, a teenage baseball uniform, the church steps after Robert's funeral. His gaze skips across them like a flat stone across the river, touch and flee, touch and flee. "Fine," he says. "If you're going to be like this, we need a system. No more surprises. Predictability." I have a system, I say, reaching for the basket again. It's called a budget, and I keep it. He rubs a hand over his jaw, staring at the floorboards where they've worn silver gray in the traffic lanes. When he looks up, there's an unfamiliar coolness in his face, as if he stepped back from the heat to do the math. We'll talk about it, he says, which he always uses when he means I will hear his solution later. He turns toward the door. The chimes on the porch tangle again as it opens. Salt air rushes in. My towels slide an inch in the basket, neat stacks nudged awry. I straighten them by habit, then stop. The habit of fixing things is not the same as the job of fixing people. I listen to his footsteps fade down the walk, the gulls answering each other over the river. The house exhales. I stand in the foyer between the nursing pin and the grid of photos and feel the measurement of what I can carry and what I can't. I pour coffee and let it cool while the house finds its quieter pitch again. The basket of towels waits on the bench edges, squared to a neatness that feels like memory work more than housekeeping. On the porch, the wind chimes unspool a softer clatter. Across the street, Dottie is kneeling in her flower bed with pruning shears, red bandana at her throat like a small flag. She spots me and tips her chin. You all right, honey? I'm fine, I call back, which is the sort of answer women give to keep the morning from tipping over. She eyes my porch. You want company or you want quiet? Let me bring you some coffee, I say, and carry 2 mugs to the rail between our houses. She stands, wipes her hands on her jeans, and meets me halfway. We lean on the picket fence Dottie's husband put in 30 years ago. The paint is a little tired at the top slats, same as the skin on the backs of our hands. From here you can see the end of the street where it slopes to the river, and if you look up, the old loft building where Ethan and Brianna rent a unit, with a balcony just big enough for 2 cafe chairs and a fern. A delivery van idles at the curb below their building. The driver hauls out a stack of glossy white boxes tied with black ribbon. Dottie lets out a breath that sounds like a whistle. That's the 3rd time this week. I sip and say nothing. The driver buzzes, waits, then disappears inside with his parcels. Sun flashes on the chrome of the loading cart. Dottie doesn't look at me when she speaks. The asks always start small. 40 here, 60 there. People teach you how to be useful to them. Some of them never quit teaching. I don't answer that either. We stand there until the coffee goes lukewarm, the kind of silence that isn't empty so much as companionable. When I go back inside, the house smells like the sea and laundry soap. I set the mugs in the sink and open my banking app. I don't hover, I look. The transactions load a little carousel of tiny squares, then flatten into a list. Groceries, pharmacy, delivery apps with names that want to sound wholesome, and there in a steadier rhythm than errands, a line I don't recognize. COQUINA Home Services, LLC, $79.99 recurring. I scroll back. Same day last week. Same the week before. I tap and let the details unpack. Subscription merchant category, household services, payment method. The virtual card I'd set up for a single errand run while I sat in a waiting room with a blood pressure cuff on my arm. I back out and pull the full statement. 2 additional charges sit like anchors. COQUINA Home Services, LLC, $249 and $149 as one labeled onboarding. I sit down at the table because the air feels thinner. I don't pay for housekeeping beyond the dust I move myself. I take photos of the screen. I make a folder and name it COQUINA. Then I place my phone face down and fold the towels, which is just moving fabric and breath from one room to another until it feels like time again. By late afternoon, the sky has that flat white Wilmington glare that makes people squint. I'm in the kitchen with a knife and a bell pepper. When there's a knock at the door, not the sharp clip of a stranger, but the polite knock of someone who expects to be let in. Ethan stands on the stoop with a bakery box. Brianna's beside him, hair lifted from her face in a way that makes you notice cheekbones first. She's holding a bouquet of grocery store sunflowers. She smiles with all the wattage she brings to a room. We thought we'd stop by and clear the air. Come in, I say. The words feel neutral in my mouth. I put the knife down and wipe my hands. In the living room, I set the flowers in a jar and place the pastries on the coffee table without opening the white box. Ethan takes the armchair like he always has since he was tall enough to call a seat his own. Brianna perches on the edge of the sofa cushion, knees together, palms on her thighs. Mom Ethan starts gently, the tone a man uses to walk a skittish animal down a ramp. We're not here to fight, we're here to avoid confusion. That would be nice, I say. We felt blindsided at Harbor, Brianna says, sorrow riding her voice like a soft cover. It was humiliating. If there's a better system, I'm all for it. I want peace. You had a system, I say. A virtual card with limits for errands, it grew into something else. Brianna tilts her head, eyes big and earnest. I didn't realize the little card was such a big deal. It was easier to keep track of household things if they went on the same method. The household, I say, is mine. Mom, Ethan says. Let's be reasonable. We're not trying to take advantage. We just need predictability. We can't worry about a card working one day and not the next. Brianna nods, quick to co-sign a word she likes. Exactly. We hate having to ask. It's awkward for everyone. If we had a fixed amount, say $1,300 a month, we could budget. No more surprise declines, no more mixed signals. She says it like a gift she's wrapping for me, a relief order, a monthly line we can all plan around. I think of the $79.99 ticking like a metronome in my transactions. No, I say. Ethan's mouth tightens, the gentleness snuffed. Mom, we are trying to be adults about this. I'm being an adult, I say. I will help at my discretion. I will not put my savings on autopilot. He shifts from coaxing to complaints with the speed of a man who's rehearsed both. You've been mixed up lately, he says. You repeat yourself. You forget what you promised. Yesterday you told me you'd leave the card alone. This morning you canceled it. That's not true, I say, and I can hear how flat the words land under the weight of theirs. I said I would think about it. Then I did. Brianna's voice is warm and confiding. We're worried about you. Bills get confusing. Apps are tricky. We could take some of that off your plate. You've already taken some, I say, and place my phone on the coffee table, the COQUINA folder open to the list of charges. I slide it toward them. Tell me what COQUINA Home Services LLC is. Brianna's gaze flicks down and back up so fast it's almost a blink. A cleaning service, she says. I booked it as a surprise so you wouldn't have to mop. Did they not show? They showed up in my bank more than they showed up here. Ethan doesn't look at the screen. This is ridiculous, he says. Mom, you need help. If you can't manage basic stuff, the law actually lets family step in. It's called guardianship. We're not threatening you. We're trying to protect you from yourself. The room tilts. Not because I believe him, because he's found the lever that can move the ground. My doctor would like to meet that argument, I say. Brianna folds her hands like a prayer and lifts them toward her mouth. This is breaking my heart, she says through her fingers. We love you. We're offering a simple solution, one fixed amount, the security to know lights stay on, and staples are in the pantry. Why is that the enemy? Security, I say, doesn't look like my name on your subscription services. Ethan stands. I can't watch you do this, he says. I won't. If you won't set up the monthly deposit, we'll have to go another route. I won't, I say, and you should go now. He waits as if I might add a but. I don't. He picks up the bakery box and tucks it under his arm like something he paid for. Brianna leaves the sunflowers. The door opens. The chimes tangle and shake. When the house is quiet again, I carry the jar of flowers to the kitchen and set them by the sink. I take 3 slow breaths. Then I fetch my accordion folder from the hall closet and sit at the dining table with a pen. I print my name at the top of a sheet of paper and make 2 columns, accounts and documents. It isn't a manifesto. It's a list of what already exists and where it sleeps. I slide my birth certificate and Robert's will from the metal box and check for the satisfying weight of embossed seals. I gather every statement for the last 3 months and clip them by account. I add the photos of my app transactions to the printer queue and make hard copies. The paper comes out warm and smelling faintly of ink. I write the word COQUINA on a tab and slip the pages inside. It's almost evening when I wipe the table and turn off the lamp. Outside, the light slants low, gilding the neighbor's mailbox and the rims of Dottie's geraniums. I cross the street and tap at her screen door. She calls, it's open, and I step into a kitchen that has seen more casseroles than battles, but knows how to hold both. I place the folder on her table. I need your eyes, I say. She listens while I show her in the plain order of paper what the phone already told me. She doesn't interrupt. When I finish, she pours sweet tea and sets the glass in front of me like a small benediction. Lorraine, she says, some things are chores and some things are fights. You've got yourself a fight. I don't like fighting. Good, she says with that dry teacher's humor that made 1,000 7th graders sit up straighter. You'll be particular about the rounds you enter. She opens a drawer and pulls out a notepad with a realtor's name on the top and a pencil sharpened to a tidy point. She writes a name and a number, tears the page free, and slides it toward me. Caleb Monroe, downtown. He's quiet as a library and mean as a snake where he needs to be. Call him in the morning. Take your folder. I tuck the paper into the front pocket and close the clasp. The wind moves through the oak outside and sets the leaves chattering. I wrap my fingers around the glass, then around the handle of my file, and feel both for what they are, cool solid, made to be held. In the morning, I dial the number Dottie wrote on the realtor pad. A receptionist answers with a voice that sounds like fresh paper. She asks my name, then asks if I can come at 10. I say yes, and I'm surprised at how steady that yes sounds. Downtown is bright and square-edged sun, glaring off windshields, the Cape. Fear a flat blade of steel beyond the brick. Caleb Monroe's office sits on the 2nd floor of a narrow building with a worn brass plate beside the door. The stairwell smells like pine cleaner and old mail. Inside the waiting room is small quiet, a basket of local magazines fanned on a table and a frame print of the river at dusk. A clock ticks in a civil voice. A man comes out from the hall, early gray at the temple's tie, loosened a half inch like he believes in breath. Miss Carter, he says. Lorraine, I answer. Caleb, he says, and the handshake is frank, not crushing or distracted. He leads me to his office. Books line one wall case, reporters, and oddly a shelf of plain paperbacks with white spines. A window looks over Front Street to a rectangle of sky caught between buildings. He waits until I sit, then sits across from me with a notepad and a pen that looks like it's been chosen on purpose. I place my accordion folder on his desk and open the clasp. I brought what I have. Transactions the subscription to something called COQUINA Home Services. 2 charges labeled onboarding. I don't pay for a cleaning service. He nods, doesn't touch the papers yet. Tell me the story first, he says. Then we'll fit the paper to it. So I tell him. I use the same order the bills arrived in, not the order of fear. I talk about the virtual card, the grocery plan that turned into boutique receipts and a chair massage. I tell him about Brianna's voice at the polite volume people use when they want to look like they're being reasonable. I tell him about Ethan's mouth tight with hurt and the word guardianship dropped like a tool on a tile floor. Caleb asks short questions not to trap me, just to anchor the lines. Dates, times, when I set up the card, when I canceled it, when Ethan first said the word system. He asks for my doctor's name and grunts satisfied when I say it. He'll give you a letter, I say. He knows me. We'll want one, he answers, and access to the last 6 months of statements. We can request IP logs from the creditors if any new lines were opened online. If mail went anywhere but here, that helps. If money was routed into a business that's actually a person, that helps more. I'm not sure what COQUINA is, I say, but it didn't clean my kitchen. He smiles at the corner of his mouth without looking like he's making fun. We'll find out who COQUINA is. He taps the folder. For now, sign a limited power of attorney letter so I can talk to your bank and the card companies, and bring me a list of every account. If you don't have the list, we'll make it. I have it, I say. Last night was long. He slides a sheet across to me, the kind of legal paper that shines a bit under overhead lights. I read the words, even though I already know I will sign. When I'm done, I set the pen to the line and write my name. The loop of the L looks like it always has. Caleb gathers the exhibits with careful hands, slipping each behind a plastic cover. 2 more things, he says. If your son and his wife contact you about money, keep responses brief and in writing. No accusations. Just no. And if anything comes to your mailbox that isn't yours, cards pre-approvals, don't throw them away. Bring them to me. I keep things, I say. I guessed, he says, and the words warm rather than judge. When I stand, I feel taller, not because he's promised anything he hasn't, but because the problem has been measured in inches, and inches are less terrifying than fog. He walks me out to the receptionist and asks her to schedule me for the end of the week. We'll know more by then, he says. Enough to set our next step. On the way home, I stop at the clinic and ask the nurse at the front desk for a copy of my last visit summary. She prints it and stamps it with a blue seal, as businesslike as a train schedule. I slide it into the folder. 2 days later, my phone buzzes with Caleb's office number. We have a few answers, he says. Can you come in? I'm there by lunch. The receptionist leads me past the waiting room to a room with a long table and a television mounted on the wall. Caleb's already there with a woman in a navy blazer the color of deep water. This is Stephanie, he says. She's a paralegal and a magician with digital trails. Stephanie slides a document packet toward me. On top is a printout from a credit bureau showing 2 accounts opened online 3 weeks apart. Consumer credit lines, she says, both approved for $10,000 each. Only one was used, 3 draws totaling $14,600. Statement addressed the loft on Castle Street. Applicant email is Ethan's, and the IP address maps to that building's service. Caleb places a fingers on the circled line. We also have confirmation from your bank that the virtual card was used to set up a recurring subscription to COQUINA Home Services, registered as an LLC in Brunswick County. Its agent of record is a woman named Amber Pierce, Brianna's cousin. The onboarding fees were initial payments to a Stripe account that pays out to Amber's personal checking. There is no service schedule at your address. I thought so, I say, but thinking so and seeing so are different countries. Stephanie taps the television on with a small remote. A still frame fills the screen, an ATM camera view greenish as if underwater. The timestamp runs along the bottom, the date from last month. This is from a Market Street branch cash machine, she says. Your bank gave us the withdrawal logs and the branch let us review the footage. The card used ends in your digits. The figure at the machine is tall and narrow-shouldered, a baseball cap pulled low, a mask high on his face, the way people still do when they don't want to be seen. He glances over his shoulder once enough for the camera to catch the line of his jaw. The angle pulls his height the way cameras do when they sit high on the wall, but I'd know the slope of that body if I were blindfolded. Caleb doesn't say anything. He keeps the image on the screen not to make me look, but to keep from rushing past it. My doctor's letter, I say, because I need another object to consider. He nods to a second packet. It's 3 paragraphs on letterhead. Good insight-oriented, no sign of cognitive impairment beyond normal for age, capable of managing her affairs. He signed his name with a flourish that looks like confidence. Next step, Caleb says, and I hear how careful he is not to say later or after this is to prepare for a hearing. There's already a petition for guardianship filed by your son claiming you're unable to manage your finances. We'll respond with this. The court will set a date. Until then, keep your accounts frozen where they can be frozen and don't speak with them alone. The date comes within 2 weeks, faster than feels fair and yet slow as sap. In that time, I move through the house like a person who knows each plank's complaint, each drawer's stick. Dottie brings over a pound cake, then pretends she made too much, so I won't have to thank her. In the evenings, I take out the folder and lay the pieces on the table, the way a mechanic lays parts on a cloth clean in order ready to be fit back into a working thing. The morning of the hearing is clear and damp air heavy as a wet towel. The new Hanover County Courthouse stands in its bicycle rack of columns like something meant to last longer than drift. Dottie rides with me and squeezes my arm once before we climb the steps. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzz with static and the halls smell like 1,000 paper files exhaling at once. Outside the courtroom, a young man in a new suit straightens his tie and steps forward when he sees Ethan and Brianna. He's the kind of lawyer who stands with his toes on a line no one else can see. Ethan doesn't look at me. Brianna meets my eyes with a level calm, then lowers them to her phone. Caleb arrives without hurry. He nods to the other lawyer in a professional way that has no friendliness in it. "Good morning," he says to me, and it sounds like exactly that, a greeting, not a spell or a promise. We file in when the clerk opens the door. The courtroom is smaller than television would make it, all benches and varnish and a flag that hangs as if even cloth feels solemn here. The judge is a woman with hair pinned close to her head, the kind of bearing that suggests she has seen people try things they shouldn't, and it has not impressed her. The clerk calls the case. The young lawyer stands and introduces himself, rattling off docket numbers as if the cadence can carry the day. He paints a picture of a woman in decline, confused, forgetful, erratic with money. He calls Ethan to the stand. Ethan answers questions with the slow clarity of someone who has practiced his story. He talks about bills paid twice and others left open of a supermarket scene where his wife was publicly shamed by a card that didn't work. He says he's worried. He says guardianship is a shield. He looks like a good son who hates being here. Brianna dabs at her eye with a tissue. When it's her turn, she speaks about wanting stability for everyone, about how hard it is to talk about money and families, about her love for me. She says the word love like people say the name of a country they vacationed in once and remember is very clean. Caleb rises when they finish. He doesn't stride or boom. He asks the judge's permission to approach the easel that holds a pad of large paper, the kind kids use for drawing houses with smoke from the chimney. He flips to a page with a simple chart, dates on one side, events on the other. He begins with the doctor's letter, reads the relevant line, and hands it up. He asks that it be entered as Exhibit A. Then he asks me to take the stand. I do. My palms don't sweat. He asks me when I started night shifts after Robert's death and when I stopped. He asks how I handle my bills. I answer because the truth is a fixed star and I know where it sits for me. He nods, thanks me, and calls Stephanie. She speaks about IP addresses the way a gardener speaks about dirt, what grows in which soil and why. She points to the printout, shows how the online accounts were keyed from the loft's broadband, not my house. She introduces a copy of an envelope addressed with my name and the loft's address, a pre-approval that was forwarded there by choice. Caleb clicks the remote and the ATM still appears. He doesn't ask me who it is. He asks Stephanie to read the timestamp and then asks me to read the appointment time on my clinic summary for that date. We don't play television, we just lay two numbers side by side and let the arithmetic be visible. He turns to the COQUINA file last. He shows the subscription screen, the onboarding fees, the registry page naming Amber Pierce as agent. He lays a bank record from Stripe on the overhead projector showing payouts to a personal account. Each piece is small. Together they take up the table. The young lawyer objects when he can, mostly to the rhythm. The judge overrules when she must and says sustained when the point wanders where it shouldn't. The air conditioner hiccups once and sighs itself back into a hum. When it's over, the judge leans back, fingers steepled, as if the bench itself is reminding her to measure twice and cut once. She speaks without ornament. This court finds Ms. Carter competent to manage her affairs, she says. The petition for guardianship is denied. Her gaze moves to the other table, dismissed with prejudice. She looks down at the exhibits, then back up. As for the financial irregularities raised today, the evidence supports misuse of Ms. Carter's accounts. Restitution in the amount of $27,400 is ordered to be paid on a schedule the clerk will set. Any accounts fraudulently opened in Ms. Carter's name are to be closed by the issuing entities with adverse reporting removed. For the safety of all concerned, I am issuing a civil no-contact order for 12 months. Counsel will prepare the appropriate orders. The gavel is a formality. The words have already done the work. Papers shuffle, the clerk calls the next case. We gather our things. In the hall, people stand in small knots already starting other lives. Ethan stares at the marble tile as if it will tell him what to do. Brianna's hand is on his arm light like a paperweight on a loose sheet. I step past them without touching. Caleb doesn't offer congratulations. He says, "Let's make sure you understand the paperwork," and we find a bench near the window where light pools like a lake. He explains the restitution schedule and the order's boundaries in language that would pass a kitchen table test. He hands me copies and a pen and asks me to initial where the yellow tabs bloom. By the time we walk outside, noon blazes off the courthouse steps. Dottie waits in the shade of a live oak, her red bandana dulled to dark. She studies my face and then nods once satisfied. "Okay," she says the way people say okay when dinner's off the stove and the table's set, and they know you can sit down. We drive home with the windows cracked so the wind can cut the heat. On River Road, a heron flaps across the marsh, long legs, tucked movement, elegant as a thought finishing. Dottie talks about tomatoes, whether the heat will ruin the vines. I answer and don't hear my voice as strange. At the house, I carry the folder to the dining table and set it in the center. The rooms are the same size they were this morning. The light sits in the same squares on the floor. I pour water into the sunflower's jar and watch bubbles rise and then pop. The phone lies face down where I left it. It doesn't ring. In the afternoon, I walk to the river and sit on a bench. Across the water, the battleship sleeps under the sun, hulking and quiet. A boy rides past on a scooter, his father jogging behind him with a paper cup of lemonade. Tourists cluster with cameras in the middle of the boardwalk, a current you have to step around. The wind lifts my hair at the temple's cooler near the water than the street. When I go home, the house unlocks under my hand the way it always has a turn, a catch, a push. I step into my own air and close the door with the soft latch I like better than a slam. The chimes shift a little on the porch. In the kitchen, I put on a kettle. The nursing pin on the wall glints in the late light. On the table, the papers I signed rest under a paperweight shaped like a river stone, smooth and oval and heavier than it looks. I set a cup on a saucer and breathe the steam, then add milk the way I always have, not because it fixes anything, but because it makes the next swallow kinder. I lift the cup and drink, and the house holds me the way houses do when they are yours, and you have chosen what can live inside. The day after court, the house feels like a bell after the strike has faded, rings still in the air, metal settling back to itself. I water the geraniums on the porch and wipe the leaves with my thumb where dust has turned them matte. The no-contact papers sit on the end table beside the chair. I favor their legal language, as firm as fence posts. The sunflowers by the sink tilt toward the window, old light catching on their yellow like memory does on happiness you didn't expect to keep. I cook smaller now without thinking about it. 1 chicken breast, 1 ear of corn, 1 plate on the table with the fork laid to the left, the way my mother taught me. The clock in the kitchen ticks precise and unbothered. In the evenings, I walk the river walk, letting the boards under my feet count distance so I don't have to. The water carries a skin of light that reknits itself no matter who breaks it. Gulls, boats, boys throwing pebbles too hard. Dottie knocks one afternoon with a tote bag full of paperbacks and a jar of jam. She labels too sweet before I taste it. Library's short on volunteers, she says. Somebody's got to boss the returns cart. So I go. The Cape Fear Public smells like dust warmed by sun and something else, cardboard maybe, or glue. I learn the faces of people who talk to themselves in the stacks, the way the scanner likes to be angled, the precise comforting clack the carts make when wheels hit the metal edges of the floor plates. On Tuesdays, a book club that calls itself Southern Voices meets in the back room. They laugh like they've known each other through funerals and bad perms. The second week, one of them brings a story printed on pink paper because the black cartridge died. I pour coffee from a dented urn and listen to 3 women take turns reading their accents like porch fans, slow enough to be kind, steady enough to hold shape. When I go home, I clip spent blooms from the geraniums and wipe the front windows. The glass comes up so clear I catch my own face in it and startle. The woman there looks like someone who can choose what lives in her house. Caleb calls near the end of the week. He is quick, factual. The clerk has set the restitution schedule. The card companies have begun the process of removing the fraud from my credit. He asks if I have any questions. I ask whether I need to do anything. Keep your folder, he says. Keep your list. Bring the mail in every day. His voice has a dry kindness to it, the kind that doesn't apologize for being useful. 2 days later, he drops off copies of orders I already have because he knows that paper delivered by hand keeps better than paper dropped in a box. He stands on the porch and nods toward the wind chimes. That sound reminds me of the summer my mother decided she believed in breezes, he says. She hung 3 and then made us all swear we could tell which was which. Could you, I ask. No, he says, smiling with one side of his mouth, but I swore it anyway. He doesn't step inside uninvited. I ask if he wants coffee, and he says yes, if it's no trouble. It isn't. It's water and time. He holds the mug like a small animal warming his hands. His tie is looser than it was the first day we met. On the table, his briefcase looks like it was made to wait politely. He doesn't open it. We talk about nothing the way people do when they're actually building a room. He tells me his sister sends him plant cuttings through the mail like contraband taped to index cards and labeled with careful warnings about light. I tell him the names of the women in Southern voices, how one of them will only bring stories with cats because she thinks dogs belong to novels. He asks what I'm reading now. I show him a battered copy of a book about a woman restoring a lighthouse lens. He says he's on a biography of a Reconstruction senator who could write a whole speech without looking at notes and still never convinced a soul. We don't talk about court. We don't talk about Ethan or Brianna. The room holds what it can hold. He leaves with the promise to email a final checklist of what comes next, in the mechanical sense, dates, deadlines, things that move whether you push them or not. After the door clicks, I stand with my hand on the knob longer than necessary. The house has held lawmen and preachers and teenage boys with clone too big for their age. It knows how to hold a quiet man without asking. Life engages its old gears. The laundry comes due. The porch steps need sanding where a nail lifted like a stubborn tooth. I buy 2 boards at the hardware store and laugh with the boy at the register about how a plank cost is more than my first month's rent did in 1983. Back home, I lay the boards across the sawhorses Robert built and sand until the grain isn't rough under my palm. A splinter finds me anyway. I tweeze it out with a little bright sliver pane that says you still live where you work. On Saturday, the farmer's market unfurls along the river tables, covered in so much produce it looks theatrical. I buy peaches by smell, tomatoes by weight, a bundle of basil that makes my bag smell like August. A fiddler plays next to a man who sells wooden spoons. A girl with her hair in 2 buns eats a popsicle in a stripe of melted red and tells me her favorite book is the one about the mouse who learns to skate. In the heat between tents, conversations drift, prices, recipes, a rumor about a new bar no one will go to twice. At home, I bruise basil in a mortar and take it out to the porch with a plate of sliced tomatoes. Dottie comes over with a chair she carries like a bag of mulch. We eat and talk about the South the way you talk about uncles half fond, half wary. She tells me that in 1978 she drove to Georgia alone in a car with a hole in the floorboard and a dog that sang when the brakes squealed. I tell her about the night shift doctor who hummed Chopin and how patients woke easier if they smelled coffee, even if they couldn't drink it. The sun slides down the far side of the roofs and the day wrinkles willingly. Caleb appears one evening with a book and a question about a creak his front step has started making, the kind that sounds like an old man's complaint. "You're the one with the porch that actually works," he says, and then looks embarrassed for asking on top of everything else. "Come look at this hinge," I say, and show him the gate latch that Robert replaced twice before landing on the one that outlasted his patience. We kneel in the dusk and listen to metal talk to wood. He presses, I hold. I press, he holds. The latch catches with a sound that would be satisfying even if no one heard it. We lean on our heels and grin at each other like people who found something they were missing and put it back. He stays for half a glass of iced tea and tells me the small true thing that sometimes the world feels like it's operating a minute faster than the schedule you were given. I keep wanting to apologize to time, he says, and we laugh at how foolish that is and how it's not foolish at all. When he goes, he sets his empty glass in the sink without ceremony. The wind picks up just enough to set the chimes in motion. I leave the back door open and let the house breathe. Some days the quiet is a guest you're happy to feed. Some days it's a shadow that sits too close on the couch. I don't pretend otherwise. There are afternoons when I reach for my phone at the exact hour I used to hear Ethan's key, a movement as automatic as checking the stove a second time. The phone stays still. The habit unteaches itself in increments you can't see. Mail comes, flyers, a bill, a postcard from a friend in Ohio who writes in neat caps that the lake in July smells like metal and lilacs. I tack the card to the cork board by the back door. On the bottom she wrote, "Wish you were here," which has meant everything and nothing since people started moving. At the library, the Southern Voices women decide they want to read something with a courtroom in it. One of them brings a scene where a witness puts his hand on a Bible and then refuses to swear because he doesn't like to put God to work. The room laughs hard and then quiets in a way that means the laugh hit bone. After a woman in a denim jacket squeezes my arm and says only, "You're doing fine with the authority of a weather report." On a Monday, when rain arranges the day into corners, I find a pie recipe wedged in the back of my mother's church cookbook, a page wrinkled where someone spilled vanilla. It calls for cornmeal in the crust and pecans chopped so fine the knife turns them almost to paste. I make it not because anyone's coming, but because butter and sugar and heat have their own logic. The oven warms the kitchen. The timer dings. I set the pie on the rack and listen to the filling settle with the little clicks of cooling sugar. Late that week, Caleb comes by with 2 paperbacks from the white-spined shelf in his office. Trade, he asks, and I hand him The Lighthouse. We sit in the backyard where the grass browns at the edges and mosquitoes find ankles the way they always do. He reads a page aloud because he likes the shape of it in his mouth. I close my eyes and let the words be air. Above us, the oak makes a lace of evening against a blue that will be black before either of us says anything else. We clear our glasses and plates and carry them inside together. He pauses by the nursing pin on the wall. Heavier than it looks, he says, touching the frame. Yes, I say. It always was. By October, the heat loosens its grip. The oak drops a lace of brown along the walk, and the river wind comes cooler through the screens. We keep our routines because they fit Dottie's tote of paperbacks. The library cart's agreeable clack Caleb on the porch, some evenings with a book he means to lend and keeps forgetting to leave. On a Saturday morning, we drive to Carolina Beach with a basket thermos, 2 cups, a napkin, with a pattern like waves. The gazebo sits pale in the early light. A parks volunteer straightens chairs no one will use. Dottie stands under the rafters in her red bandana, like punctuation that knows where the sentence ends. Caleb's sister Miriam holds a small bouquet tied up with twine, the blooms clipped from a yard I've never seen. We sign our names on a line the clerk stamped earlier in the week. A man from the town office clears his throat and reads the words in a voice that could call roll. We answer the parts that are ours. Caleb's hand is warm. The wind off the water lifts the hem of my blue dress and worries it like something with a pinion. Far down the shore, Cure Beach Light hovers small and white against a sky that isn't finished deciding its color. There is no music beyond the gulls and the faint thrum of a boat we can't see. Dottie dabs at both eyes with the paper tissue and mutters about sand. Miriam squeezes my arm hard enough to leave a memory. When it's done, we eat slices of pound cake from waxed paper and pour coffee that has cooled and still tastes like what it is. Caleb tucks the signed paper into a folder and taps the edge straight with 2 fingers, the way meticulous people calm themselves. Back home, the house receives us as if it had been practicing. We set the flowers on the table. The chimes lay a thin shimmer over the quiet. I take off my shoes and line them neatly by the mat, a habit older than any vow. Caleb opens the back door to let the afternoon come through and catches the gate latch with the motion we learned together in the dusk. It holds. In December, a card arrives thick stock, my name in the hand. I taught to meet the line without gripping the pencil to pain. The postmark is blurred. The return address is a store that prints things for people who want their names in gold. I turn it over. I carry it to the shelf and place it in the cedar box where I keep spare keys and a photograph of Robert looking into sun. I'll wait. I say not to the card and not to time. Caleb is by the sink running water over a colander of winter greens, the sound like small rain. He doesn't look up. He doesn't have to. Evenings go. How they go. Books traded a pie, cooled on the rack. Dottie reporting that the library scanner likes a tilt of precisely 30 degrees. The restitution checks come the way checks come, with the intelligence of paper, slow, literal, indifferent. I log them without ceremony. The no-contact order hangs between addresses like a fence that needs no paint. When the cold squares up, we move the chairs closer to the window for the light. Some nights we read in the same room, some nights we don't. The river keeps its own calendar. The gate latch catches. The chimes argue softly with the air. The geranium on the sill decides to bloom a red so frank it pulls a laugh from me I didn't expect to hear. In the morning, I brew coffee and set 2 cups on the table. Caleb brings in the paper and folds the front page, back to leave the crossword, standing like a polite guest. The house knows our steps. The light finds us where we've chosen to stand. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.